Welcome to Rhythms of Faith. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back. It's so fun to be here. So in our first ever episode, we talked a little bit about the origins of Rhythms of Faith, how the idea was born, but I wanted to go just a little deeper and ask some questions about your own experience of faith, your own experience of music, the story behind the story, if you will. So JJ, let's start with you. What is one of your favorite pieces of liturgical music? Now, I know that's going to be maybe a difficult question for someone in your profession.
Yeah.
But what is one liturgical song that you think is paradigmatic or generally awesome?
I love this one song called Center of My Life by a composer named Paul Inwood. And the reason I love it is because I think harmonically, like the harmonies of it are really interesting. Actually, it goes back and forth between kind of this major and minor key feeling. And but in addition to that, like it has a beautiful sequence in the melody. So the melody is really logical. And I remember hearing it like as a kid too, and being like, oh man, that's a good one. It's one we do with the folk choir pretty regularly as like a communion refrain type piece. Yeah, and it's just it's a beautiful song.
Kim, how about you?
Yeah, we used to sing Center of My Life at the Newman Center, the first parish I went to. There's another song, I don't know if it would be one of my favorite pieces, but it's like a really interesting piece to me. It has an interesting kind of story of how I started thinking about liturgy and ritual and liturgical music. So when I was preparing to get married and we went in to plan our music, we were asked like, what piece of music do you want for this part of the mass, and what piece of music do you want for this part of the mass? And for the communion song, we chose I Am the Bread of Life. And the music director said to me, oh, that's a really hard piece, but because you'll probably have a lot of people there from the parish, it'll be all right. They'll be able to carry the song. And it was surprising to me because not, being musically trained, I had never thought of it as a hard piece. I learned the whole piece by rote, just by like sitting in a parish of people that had sung it, hundreds and hundreds of times. And so it got me thinking about the way that we learn music and the way that we learn liturgy and the way that things that are hard can feel easy if you just do it really slowly with a bunch of people that already know how to do it. So I think that's actually, maybe part of the story behind the story for me.
So we talk about sort of the way that music forms us. We've talked about that in the class, but there are also people who for us are examples of faith and of liturgy, spirituality. So Kim, maybe we can continue with you. Who's one person who really formed you liturgically? I know there might be many, of course, but is there someone in particular who has been an example?
I mean, I obviously have to choose my dissertation director, Nathan Mitchell, who, sadly we lost this summer. I think what was really inspiring to me about working with Nathan was his endless patience for the real human layer of liturgy. He had this kind of spirituality of awe and wonder that we would gather to worship God again, week in and week out. And I remember him talking in a reverent way about the way human beings always get it wrong because we're finite. And so we can't praise perfectly. And I think for people who do liturgy at a professional level, one of the real temptations or one of the real dangers spiritually is that you become enough of a connoisseur that you can start to dislike or even hate the thing that you love. You can start to tear it apart. You can be incapable of participating in it. And he was a real witness to me of how to resist that temptation by opening yourself again and again to the wonder of the Christian assembly gathering together to do what it does badly.
JJ, how about you? Who formed you
I gotta-
liturgically, musically?
Yeah, I got to go with my high school music teacher. His name's Jim Diot. He was the choir director at my high school, which was an all boys Lasallian Brothers high school. But then he also became my piano teacher after a year or two, and he was extraordinarily passionate about music, about faith, about education, and I think what he really taught me was this like unquenchable passion for making music and liturgy feel like something. And that was true in the way that he taught me piano. It was very, when you learn piano, like you have to learn how to use your body, hold your body a certain way, hold your arms a certain way. And it was all about sort of gravity and being able to put your whole body into the sound to create this feeling in the sound. But that was also true in the way that he accompanied the choir and the way that he taught the choir to sing. It was very much like this, he would talk about it as arm weight technique. And when you accompany a singer, you have to ground their sound so that they feel kind of bold enough to be vulnerable in their presentation of a melody. So we had, he was kind of like old school choir director and was a little wild sometimes, which he wouldn't mind me saying. But like it was clear it was just always clear that he loved what he did, and it was what he did was for God, and it was the passion that came from that was he wasn't going to apologize for, which was an amazing witness.
We stand on the shoulders of our high school teachers.
We do. Yes, we sure do.
One of the fun things that has been happening in the Rhythms of Faith class is this complexification of the boundary between sacred music and secular music. That it seems to me that one of the sort of motivating factors of Rhythms of Faith is sort of questioning, well, what do these various genres mean, and in what ways are they already mixing? Or are they artificial? So I want to ask JJ, and this is another hard question to pick one song, but is there a song that is not explicitly scripturally based or liturgical or quote unquote Christian that you see as profoundly spiritual? One of those songs that sort of bridges the divide.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I'm going to preface it a little bit just by saying that I think there's always been this tension in sacred music between, what sets it apart and what makes it relatable. And I think that's a healthy tension and a necessary tension for practitioners, for, people of faith to hold. We're constantly trying to find a way to allow sacred music, liturgical music, to sort of raise our eyes to God and raise maybe broaden our gaze to those around us. And those two things are, they might require different feelings, different sounds in order to kind of shake us out of our malaise sometimes. So I'm very much in favor of trying to find new ways to shake us out of that, and myself included. The song I love, which you already know the answer to this, I'm sure, but it is scriptural, but not necessarily liturgical, is Sufjan Stevens' The Transfiguration. Or he has another one too called Now That I'm Older. And it's, I'll talk about that one just for a second, because it starts with these like ethereal voices. And the way that he kind of like lets the voices are his, right? The ethereal voices are his, and maybe one female singer that's kind of overdubbed on top. The song starts out with this like very distant feeling, like I'm in the background of some kind of scene. And as the introduction builds, it's almost like he focuses the lens of the camera, and all of a sudden you hear the first line of the song, and it's like he's coming towards you and just like handing you something in this incredible way. also it's, it's about nostalgia a little bit now that I'm older. But yeah, that song always kind of really, it's one that consistently gives me chills.
And if I might just give a shameless plug on your behalf,
Yeah.
you have recorded some of Sufjan's music.
I have,
right?
yes,
And
yeah,
our listeners can find that on
any
Spotify,
streaming service,
yes,
yeah,
anywhere you get your
yeah,
your music.
yeah. I've adapted his music to be liturgical.
That's
So,
awesome.
yeah.
Kim, I want to go deeper within this category and ask the harder hitting theological question that may or may not have an answer. So I'm not sure what you'll say.
Neither am I.
What makes a song liturgical?
I think so. My answer, which is also not an answer, so I won't disappoint you here, is that what makes a song liturgical is its recognition by an assembly of being their music. So when we talk about what is liturgy, what we're talking about is what does the church use when it gathers to give its like communal praise to God. And the liturgy, even, like if we say that if we do the liturgy of the hours in private, even if we're doing it in private, we're using the church's voice. So I think what really makes a piece become liturgical, it's like very appropriate to answer this question after talking about JJ's Vespers. What makes a piece liturgical is when an assembly lifts it up to become part of their communal witness to God's glory. So that's like not an answer, because then you would want to say things like, well, what is an assembly and how do we know if they've used right judgment? But and those questions are important questions. I'm not trying to forestall them, but in a theological sense, what makes it liturgical is the fact that it reflects and communicates the community's real true vision of what it means to worship God together as a church.
In one of our early episodes, you sort of brought a piece from the St. John's Bible for us. And I'm wondering actually if this question might relate as well to the assembly, but
probably.
The relationship between music and visual arts is a theme in the course. You use it very frequently on your PowerPoints and on our website and in our various modalities. But I was wondering if you had a favorite visual artist, again, either explicitly Christian or not.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I would have to pick, my favorite iconographer, contemporary iconographer, is Ivanka Demchuk. She's a Ukrainian iconographer that does these like really lovely images that are influenced by classical iconographic depictions and, but then often incorporates these really surprising, very modern elements, like a road barrier, for example, or a road sign, or a string of laundry. So these moments that these elements of the icon that integrate the timelessness of the Christian tradition, the eternity of God's love for us, and our contemporary experience of the here and now in ways that like kind of break my expectations.
Thinking about this sort of concept of newness, this sort of the ancient iconographic style, but together with contemporary elements. JJ, I wanted to ask, and it's sort of a question that is underneath, I think, the project, but also some of what the students have encountered in the class. Certainly have come up in some of our conversations in preparation. Say someone is skeptical of new liturgical music. There's a lot of great traditional, or I don't want to even use that word, but older liturgical music throughout the 2,000-year history of Christianity. Why new liturgical music? What does the newness bring, and what is its purpose?
Yeah. Well, I got to quote one of my colleagues, Andy McShane. He says all music was new sometime. So that's the first thing, is that it all had to come from somewhere. But the second thing I think relates to Kim's response about the assembly. It's certainly an assembly, a community that's gathered to give praise to God. In the Catholic tradition is coming from a tradition, right? We have a kind of store of things that we've agreed on over the years are things worth preserving, and not just as fossils, but as things that we can integrate into our being, in order to inform how to become, maybe would be a way to say it. And so there's this tradition, I think, creates this bedrock of understanding for us individually and for us as a community to learn how to come closer to God, or to become more like God. Secondly, I think that once we, alongside this cultivation of the tradition in ourselves, it can inform how we might learn to express that tradition in a way that is wholly new for our time and place. God is working in a new way in every time and place. And one of the ways that we can accentuate that or make it plain is to represent it artistically for now, for us and for our community that we're worshiping with. So I think that these two things go hand in hand, the sense of being formed in tradition and then allowing that tradition to be expressed anew for now.
I really like that. The tradition was, all the elements of the tradition were at one point new.
Yeah, of
and
course.
they unfold in history.
Yeah.
So a very practical question, perhaps related to how that unfolding happens. We've already mentioned today that you are a liturgical musician, songwriter, a jazz songwriter.
Yeah.
How do you get in touch with your creative desire? Very practically or more abstractly? Are there ways that you tap into those creative urges?
Yes. I think the first way is that there's usually like just an external call in some way. Call can be abstract, or it can be very practical. It can be practical, like, there's not a psalm for this Sunday that I really love, and I would love to create one. It could be abstract in that I'm sensing that we're not able to grieve properly for sins of the church or other types of things that are afflictions in our communities. And it's more abstract, but it functions equally as a motivator for me to try to find a way to express that. So underneath both of those would be this sense of trying to like keep my ear to the ground and pay attention in a variety of situations that might inspire some kind of resonance in my heart with something that I might be drawn to create. So I think that's the best way to describe it. Yeah.
Do you think there's any relationship between that sort of attention and prayer?
It's really hard for me to distinguish between the two a lot of times. So I'm not the best person to ask about that because I might not be able to differentiate them well. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Sometimes I think it's great, and sometimes I think it's like there could be more. But I do, at least in my own life, perceive those things to be very similar. I feel closest to God, and I feel like I've been able to grow closest to God through processes whereby I'm invited through that deepest desire to express it artistically. So in that very much seems like prayer to me. But it is a doing of a disciplinary act also, which, like Liturgy of the Hours, for example, like, these are things that bring us back to the table over and over, and invite us to experience the present anew each time, kind of through this lens of our memory and through the lens of the experience of the gathered assembly and the moment. So I guess I could say that these are, that is kind of like my prayer. And it certainly has yielded music that I am proud to have made, and also experiences that, inform, they're memories now that inform how I want to become going forward.
Kim, a similar question. How do you pray?
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like, how don't I pray? To your question. I remember actually there was a catechist who, when I was preparing to be received in the Catholic Church, who was trying to assist me in formation for prayer. And her advice to me was basically just do everything. Like, it was really interesting. I don't remember the exact words anymore, but she was basically like seeing very accurately the kind of need for a variety of different styles of prayer for me, and different like modes of prayer. And so she was kind of very helpfully encouraging me to like follow my own instincts with regard to like changing what style of prayer I was doing at different times of life, and so on, or even week to week or hour to hour sometimes. And so I'm not actually very good, even all these years later, at listening to that advice, but it was good advice. And like when I'm actually being, accurate about myself, I realized like what good advice it was. Liturgy of the Hours is really, really important for me, particularly within an assembly that prays it together. I just find that it isn't as fruitful for me praying alone. And I think that's because there's something about the rest of the assembly keeping the pace for you that's really important for me, not to get either like, you can read as fast as you can read, nor to get hung up on like one particular line, but just to like let the whole the words of the liturgy wash over me and bring whatever it is that they're bringing that day. So I have that sense of the Spirit speaking to me of like, what is the meaning of this psalm for today for me, and not just like what's the meaning of a psalm in an abstract academic sense, which I can also do if you press me. But which isn't for me, it's not an experience of prayer, even though it sometimes can lead to prayer. But then I also do Lectio Divina, where Lectio Divina in some ways is the exact opposite, where you really do linger over a passage, and it really is very personal and really listening to the Spirit. So those are kind of two modes that have been really important for me. There are a lot of modes of prayer that are, and of course, I also find praying in the Mass to be really important. One of the things that's always been really important to me since my earliest time in the faith is actually the prayer following communion, watching my brothers and sisters come forward to receive communion, and recognizing in each of them the body of Christ that is also in me, is like a really profound mode of prayer for me.
Yeah, Kim, I love that too, because the balance between the sort of expressly physical nature of the Liturgy of the Hours in community as balanced with something like Lectio Divina that's more contemplative, more private. I think there's an unnamed pressure that the sort of contemplative and quiet one is the real prayer, and the other one is for show or something.
Not if you're Benedictine.
Right. but it's an interesting sort of societal pressure too, and something we've noticed with our students that
It's true.
there's the real prayer when I do it alone and
Yeah.
in private and in quiet, and then there's the other kind that's like, oh yeah, it's performative, so it's less holy because it involves my body.
And that relates back to your sort of caveat, which I'm not your spiritual director, but I'm going to say, about, well, is that, I experience it as prayer, but it's disciplinary. But, of course, for the Benedictine tradition, prayer is a discipline. And progressing in your mastery of that discipline is how you progressively enter into God's will for you.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and to kind of come back to your question at the beginning too, some of the times where I've felt I've been most prayerful have been times when I've actively sought to kind of ramp up my body in that activity of something like composing, where it's, I want to use the full apparatus, mind and body, mind, body, and spirit, in order to kind of like allow God to hopefully speak through that. And so there is that extra layer of like really kind of involving my body intentionally in the act of creation that I think is essential.
So I was originally going to do a fun closing question that I want to modify a little bit. I was going to ask if you were on a deserted island, what's one item that you would bring? But I want to change that because we've been talking a lot about the communal dimensions, the embodied communal dimensions. So if you could only offer one thing to a community, you uniquely are bringing anything. I leave it very vague. And let's imagine that your family's already there and you have food. So, so it's not a real deserted island. But what is one thing, physical, spiritual, psychological, emotional, one gift that you would like to bring to a community? And you can only offer one. Let's start with you, JJ.
Oh, I was going to try to make Kim go first, but I think I would bring my desire to create things anew with the community. Because I think that in an age of polarization and in kind of easy external critique, sharing the experience of making new things together has a way of binding us that is unique among anything I've really seen. And it carries with it not just the experience in the moment of making the thing, but also the pride after of having done something we didn't expect we could do together, that we get to both remember for ourselves and remember communally from that moment on.
Nice.
Yeah, and my answer is actually going to be right in line with that. My first instinct when you ask this question is, what do you have to offer but yourself, right? And so I think, for me, it would be a kind of something I've learned as a deep listening, a kind of deep charitable love for the other that allows for vulnerability and for even differences of opinion, differences of understanding to emerge, and often, to actually complement one another, but sometimes also to be reconciled into a kind of bigger understanding that can unite a group. So yeah, that's a great question.
That is a good question.
We just have a couple minutes. And when I was first here, I asked the question, if you were an animal, what would you be? Which is, of course, how we started Rhythms of Faith, the class. But in a previous episode, Dr. Vanessa Chan came and said that she asked her students a different question. If you were an instrument, a musical instrument, which musical instrument would you be? So I thought that was a really cool question.
Yeah.
So if you were an instrument, JJ, what would you be?
Mine is so obvious.
Say it anyway.
I would have to
The
be a
dulcimer.
piano. Yeah, right.
But
The hammered
what
dulcimer.
piano, JJ?
Which piano? Good question. A Fazioli. Yes.
Okay, good.
Italian, beautiful.
Oh.
Yeah, incredibly rich sound, handmade piano from Italy. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I didn't know this question was coming, and it is nonetheless, my answer is going to be like a direct echo of what I just said. I always feel like I'm sort of soaking in whatever instrument I happen to be listening to. So as I've listened to, especially I noticed this because my daughter has experimented now with 4 different instruments. And every time she picks up an instrument, it reminds me of all these different moments in my life when I was like particularly moved by a piece that includes that instrument. But these are things that I don't think about all the time without that kind of provocation. So anyway, I don't know what that means. I guess I'm a receptacle for musical instruments, a mirror.
Like a speaker.
Yeah.
Amp. An amp. Yeah. An amp. Yeah.
A reed of God, some might say.
Yeah. Oh.
Oh, that's lovely.
Thank you for letting me join you. I mean, this has just been delightful.
It's really been fun.
My last question is just very briefly in, I don't know, a phrase or 2 phrases. What's one piece of spiritual advice you'd want to offer our listeners for those who are looking to grow in the spiritual life, in the faith?
Can it be 2?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I have 2 pieces of advice. One is if you feel like you need a spiritual director, don't be like me and wait 20 years to find one. That's my first piece of advice. And my second piece of advice is just show up. Like, show up to prayer. Don't, question whether you're doing it right. Just keep doing it. Yeah.
Excellent. Same question.
Mine would be that every moment is an opportunity to practice listening.
It's a great place to end.
Thank you so much for joining us again on this episode of Rhythms of Faith podcast.